The Great Debaters Contest is powered by Blaze, by Safaricom, the Youth Network.
The search for the best debaters in the country continues here in Nyeri region. Welcome to the Great Debaters Contest. I am Mariam Bishar.
And I am Austin Yumbok. The motion today is African governments have not done enough to minimize disparities between rural and urban areas. We have Mumbi girls going against Kihatha. Who will be the victor or Victoria?
We'll let them answer that question for us. Proposal number 1, you have 3 minutes.
Disparities between the rural and urban areas are still very high. From Mumbi Girls High School, I'm Kimani Agnes, and I'm here obliged to propose this motion. Understanding what disparities are, these are differences that are caused by unfair treatment, especially in resource allocation, urban and rural areas. This can definitely be defined depending on the country we are talking about, but in general, urban can be defined with a high population, high increasing technology, whereas rural can be defined with low technology, low resources, and definitely low population. Now, I know you're wondering why I'm proposing this motion, saying that the government have not done enough to minimize the disparities between the urban and the rural area. First of all, look at security. The closed circuits are everywhere in the urban areas. Look at Johannesburg, the airports everywhere. Look at Nairobi. Even they've gone to an extent of putting CCTV cameras even in the highways. CCTV cameras are simply everywhere. This is because they term it as for security purpose. When you're taking your way to Soweto, just tell me if you can find any CCTV camera along the way. On your way to the northeastern, the very rural parts of Kenya, tell me if you can find any CCTV cameras on your way. The police rationing. It is a recommendation that the police should be in the ratio of 1:400. But what do we find? In the rural areas, police are everywhere. In the urban areas, the police are everywhere. But what about the rural areas? Police are not enough. I doubt if the ratio in the rural areas is 1:400. The malicious groups. Since they know that the government has mostly emphasized on security in the urban areas, they are mostly located in the rural areas. The Boko Haram in Nigeria, they are not found in Lagos or Abuja. These are found in a place called Maiduguri. Myself, I have no idea where the place is. This because it's in the rural areas and they don't emphasize security in such areas. Look at the Lord Resistant Army. They are not found in Kampala or Entebbe. These places are found these malicious groups are found in the interior parts of the Uganda. Why are these groups formed? This because they feel that they have been sidelined by the government. This because they feel that they need to show the government that they are being set aside. And that's why they're coming up with these malicious groups. That's why they're coming. So in real sense, I'll be safe to say that the urban areas, the rural area are more insecure more than the urban people. Now, illiteracy level. Schools, look at the terms of education in rural and in urban. In urban, accessibility of schools. Schools are everywhere for God's sake. But in rural area, the schools are few. Schools are counted. And if they are there, to access them, it's not very easy. Completion of school. Students in rural area, they don't get to complete their education because of various stuff. But the students in urban get to complete their education. Thank you.
We have the first opposer. Take the stage.
I, Brian Karemi, is opposing the motion. African government have not done enough to minimize the disparities between rural and urban centers. Don't let them fool you. We don't care, nor mind whether you come from the moon. I'm greatly and deeply concerned that these beautiful girls are going astray. We all are intelligent. We are not morons. We do not need a driver to drive the truth home. Do we? First and foremost, the government have introduced many schools in the rural areas. Thus, people in the rural do not have to move to the urban to gain the so-called education. That that makes it conspicuous that the government is doing something to minimize these disparities between urban and rural. Secondly, the government have done a large part in building of market centers to improve business and employment in rural areas, thus reducing dependence from urban centers. These markets which are being created in the rural areas have brought to the economical development of the rural areas, thus there is no need to move to the urban to buy and sell goods. In addition to that, farm schemes and settlements have also been set aside by the government. This has led to the increase of food production from the rural areas. Health improvement has also been a great concernment made by the government. They include the so-called Beyond Zero campaign that is almost readily available everywhere. This has eased the dependence of health facilities from the urban centers by the people living in the rural areas. From my own point of view, road, transport, and infrastructure have been improved by the government. Transport system by railway, including the standard rail gauge, has also passed through some rural areas, thus is improving transport in a higher rate in those rural areas. This makes it more clear to state that the government has done enough since much of the raw materials come from the rural areas. Employment has been created by the government. This includes NYS, the National Youth Service. Many of those people do not have jobs. Thus, they need something to put in their pockets. The government has done a major role since it has created employment for them.
Okay, thank you. We'll hear rebuttals. Proposition, you have 3 minutes.
Government concentrating its resources to urban areas is like preaching to the converted, right? From Mumbi High School is Monene Hana proposing to the motion that the African governments have not done enough to end disparities between the rural and the urban centers. You know, one thing that I know is that for you to see, you don't have to have 4 eyes. And that's the reason I'm gonna put that down. Look at me clearly. They told us that the first opposer told us this, that the standard railway gauge has passed through rural areas. But let's have a deeper and heave deeper into the meaning of this. You see, this standard railway gauge, most of the terminals are in the urban areas. We see them in Nairobi, Naivasha. We have them in Mombasa. We have them in most of the towns. Are they in the rural areas? No. So the government has done nothing totally to end disparities between the rural and the urban. You see, in Nairobi, let me pose a question to you. As we were coming this way, how many skyscrapers did you find in the rural areas that we passed through? Did you find any? Did you see? No, because these skyscrapers are mostly situated in the urban areas. So the government has not paid much attention to the rural areas. It has neglected the rural areas. Looking into the early childhood bearing, as Africans in the sub-Saharan region in Africa, we find that the aged 15 to 19 are the ones who are bearing children. Example, in Egypt, 4% are from urban areas. 96% are from the rural areas. What is the government doing about it? It has done nothing to end these disparities in the rural areas. And once it was said that, si vous voudrez changer la vie et l'histoire de la continent Afrique, on doit développer les routes et les infrastructures. Meaning that if you want to change the lives and the history of African continent, you have to improve and develop infrastructure, including roads. Looking at the epidemics, during the Ebola outbreak, which country was hit most? Liberia. Was it that the town like Monrovia was hit? No, it was not. It was a village called Maliandu. This is a village. It is so much interior. These people have not been sensitized by the government in order to know that these epidemics are going to attack them. We have lost so many lives. So, my fellow, join us to propound to this motion that the government has not done enough to end disparities between the rural and the urban areas. I rest my case.
Opposition will hear your rebuttal. You have 3 minutes.
When I was a little child, I admired traveling to Nairobi. But now I'm old. I have the knowledge to know that the government have done enough in the rural areas. First of all, to my dear sisters here, did you take time to analyze on the motion? We aren't speaking to end. We are speaking to minimize. We are talking here about minimizing. Secondly, the government have done a lot to its level best, but due to the corrupt leaders that we have who are embezzling funds which have been given to the rural areas, they are putting them for themselves so that they can satisfy their wants and live a comfortable life. Secondly, the government have been supporting the sports clubs, encouraging the youths to play football, research sports like football in fields. It has been giving out funds to the Coca-Cola, which is a tournament game going on. And yes, I will pose a question here. Is this an urban area? Or can you compare the rural areas nowadays and the urban areas? Compare them from the past. How are they before independence? Where did you find most of the televisions? Where did you find electricity? The government nowadays is electrifying all houses in the rural areas, and yet you are saying that the government is not yet doing something. Then I prove you wrong. Secondly, I'd like to object a point that the first proposer said about security. The government have been constructing security rights which are helping people to travel at night without fear of theft. So when here you are saying that the government has not yet done anything, you are totally wrong. Another one, you just said about unfair treatment. Really compare it before even independence. How was it? Can you look, as we go back to the before independence, Mzee Jomo Kihatha himself, he was supposed to be living in the State House, but lived in Gatundu South. His son followed the same footsteps. Another point, it's all about industries. The government have lowered the taxes of constructing industries. It have started constructing industries like in Takana, Ngamia 1, an oil refining company, which is being used to create employment to the people living in Takana who are mining and extracting the oil. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The proposers have been asked if it is uniquely the job of the government to develop rural areas, if the private sector can take part in that as well. And of course, the opposition have been asked if they feel that the government has done enough to develop rural areas and that corruption is the problem, then does that mean that government officials aren't the same people being corrupt? We'll have them respond to those queries. Third proposer, you have 3 minutes.
First, I'd like to answer the question that has been posed to us. The motion is asking about the African governments. It's not about the non-governmental organization or the private sector. On to my first point. All we hear about in the media are accidents, hospitals, referral hospitals. Let's take one black spot like Salga. In Salga, how many people have you heard that they've been taken to Kihatha National Hospital? They are many. Why is that? This is because the hospitals in those rural areas like Salga, they do not have the equipment. They cannot be able to handle those victims. The government, yes, has done something, but the only thing the government has done, it has set up dispensaries, clinics, level 3 hospitals. Let's be serious. How can a dispensary deal with someone who has just come from a road accident? Let's talk sense. On to my second point, finances. I am Sharon. I live in a rural area. I want to start a business. For me to start my business, I require a loan. If we look at the urban centers and the rural centers, the urban centers have banks. They have financial institutions as compared to the rural areas. So me, as Sharon, I will be forced to move from this rural area because I cannot access that bank, I cannot access that financial institution to get my loan. I have to move from my rural area to that urban area to get what I want. Is that really fair? And I only speak as a representative of the millions of Africans out there who are going through the same situation as I am. Rural-urban migration. The African government, if it would have done enough to minimize the disparities, would we really be having people moving from these rural areas to the urban areas? Would we? No, we wouldn't. This is because they have not developed those rural areas. If the government had taken that priority to develop them, then maybe, not even maybe, it's there. The people would not have moved. Hence, that migration would have been solved. And with that, I rest my case. Thank you.
Opposition will hear your response. You have 3 minutes.
I want to respond to your question first. You asked if the government is the one who are corrupt or not the government. For me, the leaders who are given the finances to work on the rural areas were chosen by the people, because we use democracy here in Africa. But the government, it have much look on the rural areas, and it is doing a lot. On to my first point, the government is ensuring that every student is able to go to school, having the school fees to get education like students in urban areas. The government have put a limit for the school fees. The government have said that every school may not go to an extent on a high school fees. On the other side, the government is giving the bursaries to every child that is not able to give funds to pay for their school fees. This is enabling the students that are in rural areas that their parents are not able to pay for their school fees. They have an opportunity to attend to school. On to my second point. The government have set aside funds for introduction of game parks and reserves. This is enabling a rural area to develop. This is because the people in that area may start businesses to serve the tourists that may attend to that game park and those reserved. This is raising the living standards on people that live in those areas. This minimizes the disparities between rural and urban areas. On to my third point. The government have also brought up companies which are in rural areas that are buying the products from the rural people. These are the companies of coffee and tea leaves. The government have also put a rule that they have increased the cost of which they are buying crops. They are buying the products from the rural area people. This is enabling the rural people to get a living standard and closer to those of urban areas. The government have also brought up companies that are hiring earth machines. This is enabling the people in rural areas, because most of them are farmers, they are able to give products in high quality. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be hearing final statements. Ladies, you have a minute.
Now. For a town to be called an urban center, extensive development must have undertaken place. And this is the same place the government is very determined to continue developing, forgetting our rural areas. Now, my fellow students, Judge Minor, do you sharpen an already sharp knife, or do you take a blunt one and sharpen it? Logic tells me you'll sharpen the blunt one, right? As much as you're trying to convince us otherwise, the government has done something, but it has not done enough. The disparity between the rural and the urban centers is very big. I'll be doing myself injustice if I oppose this motion. I know that we know that the government is still yet to do something that we can say they have really minimized the disparity between the rural and urban. You are talking about employment. They have created employment. But as much as they are creating employment, why are our cities, urbans, flocking with people looking for employment? And if you investigate very well, these people come from the rural areas. Thank you.
Gentlemen, you have 1 minute as well.
Wow. Unfortunately, my sister takes Nairobi as my grandmothers did many years ago. That is the last century. We rebuke your mentality and ask for your hands to join us and build a strong continent instead of blaming the government for all this. My sisters are trying to equalize the urban and rural areas. The motion does not state that we have to leave them equal, but at least to minimize the differences. Rural-urban migration does not only cause the lack of employment, but it also causes the search of more white-collar jobs, which sometimes is considered as pride, since no one wants to go and remain in the farm digging, whereas they need something more better. For most of those who remain in the rural areas, at least gain something little, which keep them busy, thus reducing theft and idleness.
Kihatha Secondary School, I noticed that all of you were using the two words have and has wrongly. Please work on that. Find out when do I use have, when do I use has. Also polish up on your language. I'm sure you can do much better than that. Edwin, specifically, I observed that you had some very good points. If only you were able to articulate those points and do so very well. Agnes, Mumbi girls, I like the way you have presented yourself the second time as compared to the first time. The first time, I think you are not relaxed, but you are able to pick yourself up the second time. And to the three of you, I think you have given a good fight. So, all the best.
Kihatha Secondary School, the judges awarded you 62%. Please give them a round of applause. Mumbi girls, the judges awarded you 65%. You're our winners for the debate.
Congratulations to the ladies, and thank you to both teams for a wonderful debate. Thank you to our audience here in studio and those of you at home for watching. I have been your host, Mariam Bishar.
And I am Austin Yumbok. Catch you next time.
The Great Debaters Contest is powered by Blaze, by Safaricom, the Youth Network.